All right, away we go. So welcome back
Away we
everyone
go.
to the October, or excuse me, the September. I'm jumping ahead. The September installment.
Yeah, hey, the year's gone fast enough. We don't need any help.
I know. I really don't need to push it ahead. But today I have a very, very special guest with me. I met Wayne. We are both 30 under 30s. But I met Wayne this past April when we did the 30 under 30 mastermind in Charleston. I don't know how it took us so long to meet one another, Wayne, because we have so many.
I have no idea. We have like 3,000 friends in common. Like, I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, we friended each other on Facebook and we're like, oh, so you know everyone. It was such a pleasure to meet Wayne and interact with Wayne, and his story was one that really resonated with me and something that I think is going to be a theme across a few of our monthly coaching club calls for the next few months, which is a little bit of self-care and just kind of some mindset stuff of knowing where you are. Because I think in real estate, especially, this idea of burnout and this idea of kind of keeping up with the Joneses is more than just prevalent. It's rampant, if you will. But Wayne will share some of his story. He wrote this awesome book called The Art of Getting Back Up. It's not that big, so it's not that big of a commitment to I strongly suggest at least taking the time to read it because it's a really powerful story. And then we'll go through some stuff. But Wayne, without any further ado, why don't you introduce yourself, because you have a much better handle on everything.
It's always weird. Like, don't you ever feel a little weird introducing yourself? Like, I'm here and I don't know, I was born at a young age and now I'm here. Like,
Well, I'll tell you though why I changed this practice, because I had a good friend of mine who named Via Williams, who many of you know, and that said to me, it's okay to be humble and still pat yourself on the back. And she said that to me years ago. And since that point, I've really focused on introducing myself, and I love when people introduce themselves, because I think sometimes it's hard to talk about our accomplishments and all of the good that we're doing in the world. And frankly, it kind of
totally agree.
Not to jump ahead, but I think it's one of those things that when you don't focus on those things, it's easier to fall into a really destructive mindset.
I've seen so many people do that. They struggle with humility, and like humility means like they can't have high self-confidence. It's like, no, it's two totally separate things. Anyway, I'm skipping around, but yeah, totally separate things. You can have high self-confidence and still be a humble person. So, all right. So I was born in Kansas, grew up in Canada, which was confusing. Lived in Alaska for 10 years. Now I'm in Dallas. So I did like the whole triangle thing. Grew most of my life. I was told how my interpretation was how dumb I was, that I wasn't smart, that I couldn't do much. You know what I mean? All these learning disabilities, read everything backwards, all that great stuff. At 15 years old, I decided to go out on my own. So I left my parents at 15 years. They were great parents. I just was ready to take on the world. So at 15, I moved out and literally traveled the world. So I spent several years doing relief work all over the world, in Korea, Bolivia, Guatemala, all over, which led to a couple life near-death experiences. So I had a couple near-death experiences during that time, which made a big impact on me, right? So did that, got into real estate. Like, I don't know how people get into real estate. Like, the story's always different. Somebody's like, I was walking a dog, I saw a brick, and now I'm a realtor. Like, I don't know what happened. Yeah. Right, like every story is different, right? So got into real estate. In the beginning, like I was struggling big time. And then I finally kind of figured out what I needed to do, got in my stride, and became, one of the top agents, became a 30 under 30, did all that, which sounds awesome. And then I literally screwed my entire life up. So I had looking back, I had a bunch of like limiting beliefs and stuff that was going on in my mind. Like had an affair, lost a bunch of business, like lost everything, to the point where I almost took my life. And that was when I had my big, several big epiphanies, but one of them was nobody was coming to save me. And I needed to, if I was going to survive, I had a choice to take my life or, and be my own hero, or check out. So it's kind of led me on a mission similar to yours in life, and it's not I was one, my whole identity was wrapped up in my numbers and in how people perceive me and in all this stuff. When all that went away, there was nothing left. And I was like, well, because that's who I was. Now that I am nothing in my mind, I may as well just check out, and the world would be better off if I wasn't here. So it was a big journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now
No,
so then I went on and now, coached 6,000 agents in the last several years. I coach for, pro athletes. I coach musicians. I coach doctors. I coach realtors. It's freaking awesome. So
yes, no, totally. It's an amazing journey. And I think I speak for all of us when we are so thankful that you saw the opportunity that you had in front of yourself and you were your own hero. But let's talk for a moment. We won't spend too much time on this, but let's talk for a moment about kind of the days, weeks, months, years leading up to that moment, because I think that is something, especially in real estate, that is really prevalent that happens. Is we kind of have this comparison mentality of, am I doing enough production? Am I keeping up with the top producer in my office? Am I doing this? And it's less about what's in our hearts and our minds and becomes more about all of this outward facing stuff. And my belief is that we don't talk about it. And that your story is, and part of what resonated with me is, I've had my battles with depression. I've had a similar story to you growing up, where I had severe ADHD, and I was medicated, and I was told I couldn't do it without medication, and, all of those things. And, I think everybody has their own story of it, but it's one of those things that, like, it happens more than I think any of us realize. And no one's talking about it.
Yeah. I really think we're having a identity crisis. With a lot of people. And I see this in, it's funny, a friend of mine, we were talking about this the other day, he used to be a former football player, right? And he was talking about how so many people get out of that. And he was talking about the suicide rates and the depression rates and everything else. And it's because they have no identity. All their entire identity was in the game and who they were there. Then when that goes away, everything shifts. So for me, what I realized was, it kind of just like you said, like all of a sudden you start getting these props. All of a sudden, like you're on stage at Mega Camp, and then this happens, right? You're 30 or 30, right? All this stuff happens, and all of a sudden it's like, oh shoot, I better keep up. Like I better do more transactions next year. Plus that's where you're getting all of your praise. Nobody's being like, man, I just love that you're such a friendly, kind person, right? No, everyone's like high five, a gazillion transactions, whatever, right? And I think like. All of my insecurities, that bolstered all of that, right? Like it became, it's like, oh man, you know what? I am involved in my community. I'm doing this, I'm making money, I'm whatever. And your whole identity gets wrapped up there. And what I believe is, now my belief is, I think every single day you got to remind yourself who you are. And I think that the world is trying to convince you who you are, which is not enough, which is you don't have enough, you're not enough, you're not smart enough, fast enough, strong enough, whatever it is. And I think every single morning you have to remind yourself who the heck you are. So for me, it's like, I'm love, I'm a child of God, I'm enough, I'm resourceful, I'm powerful, whatever. But going, and I even have a bunch of lists of them all, but I think every morning I have to renew my mind and remind myself who the heck I am. I like success, I like money, I love all that stuff. Like I would rather have a life with a bunch of money than a life without a bunch of money, but it doesn't define who I am. Make sense?
Right. And I think the other thing, so I don't know that I've ever told you this, but now I'm telling you this. But after I
feel like these are confessions, right? It's like when you and I get on the phone, it's like, there we go.
No, totally, it is. But after I met Wayne, his story resonated with me so much, and I realized, because I sat in the audience and I felt, wow, this guy is talking about some seriously personal stuff that I've gone through that I haven't really spoken about openly. And I think, without obviously naming names, the amount of hands that were raised in that room when you asked a question of, have people considered suicide? Have people been, depressed? Have people gone through that sort of stuff? I'm getting goosebumps again, but I got goosebumps in that.
Me too.
I realized, whoa, it's more of us than it's less of us, And so one of the challenges or commitments that I made leaving, and I'm going to challenge all of you guys watching to make, is I think as an industry, as a human, we just need to realize that we're in it together. And so I've made this commitment of, in the past when I saw somebody who seemed off or felt off, I kind of just shrugged it off and said, maybe they're having a bad day or they're going through something. And I didn't really pry because I considered it prying. But now I've made this renewed commitment to ask the question, like, are you okay? Can I do anything to help? And I think that is something that if all of us could do that a little bit more, the world would probably be a little bit better of a place, because I think back to when I was going through my depression, and I don't know that I would have known the answer to that question of what can I do to help. But had somebody just sat and had coffee with me and given me kind of the space to feel that, that might have changed some things for me and helped me get out of that space a little earlier. And I'm sure yourself as well. So I think that's something that, I know that's a really vulnerable story and place for you to be. So thank you for sharing that. But it's just something that I want to challenge all of you guys for.
Man, I love that. Have you ever watched the video Bill Hart talks about shoulder taps? Did you ever see that video?
Yes.
Man, like that's what that reminds me of. You know what I mean? Just like you feel it, and there's like this little bit. He calls it a shoulder tap, and it's like how often do we shrug those away, and yet when you lean into those, usually there's something amazing that is about to happen. So
yeah, absolutely. When we at the core, what we all are, besides realtors, besides brokers, besides all of the things that we are, is we're all human, and we have to realize that the way people act, the way people feel is all caused by something. It's either caused by self-satisfaction, self-dissatisfaction, some sort of feeling. And so understanding, and being there for somebody, I always think to myself, I tell my kids this, if God forbid we were ever in, dire straits, I would want somebody to help you guys. And so that's why I help other people. I don't do it for the pat on the back. I do it because I hope that I'm never in that situation, but I hope that if I am, somebody wants to help. So I think that's something that's huge for us, because we're not, you don't see that happen a whole lot in our industry. And so that's something that I definitely think is important. So I think
one of the things that was revealed in that room is like, I guess last thing, one of the things that's revealed in rooms like that is like, your good friends, check on them too. You know what I mean? Like even the people that you think are doing great, like it's okay every once in a while just have a real conversation. Go, hey, I really want to know, how are you? And just let there be some sign. Just actually check in. I think that that's healthy to do every once in a while. So
yeah, and I think the other thing too is, the people close to you. I'll never forget my good friend Zach Shabbat, when I was kind of in the thick of things. He said to me, how are you? And I answered the way we all did. I'm good. I'm fine. And he did what most of us don't do. And he asked again, and he said, no, really, how are you? Like something seems off, and kind of dug, and it's uncomfortable when it happens for sure. But, I'm so thankful to him that he did that, because that's super important. So you have a tool that you and I have presented on together that I think is a super useful tool that kind of helps you stay in this positive mindset, and this not just positive mindset, productive mindset, called the 5 R's. So are you cool with us just diving in and going through the 5 R's?
Yeah. No, I'm cool with that. I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So the first one is reframing that I have written down. They may be in a different order.
Yeah, no.
The order?
No, you're good. Yeah. No, keep going. No, go for it. Yeah.
So the first one I have is reframing. So explain to us what reframing is, Wayne.
So I think that the reframing is first of all, like these 5 R's to me are like having like 5 tools in your toolbox, right? Because like we all get tilted. We all have bad days. We all have stuff that happens. And I think that like what my goal with these 5 R's is like, it's kind of like, and we talked about this before, but most of us have like a fire extinguisher in our house somewhere, right? Not because we're like planning on starting a fire, but we have a fire extinguisher in our house in case something goes down. Do you know what I mean? So like, or we've had a fire before and we go like, I'm never going to be without a fire extinguisher again. I'm going to make sure I have one, right? Same thing, like if you've ever like had a flat tire and realized you didn't have whatever that wrench is called in your trunk, right? You're like, I'm going to make sure I have 2 for the rest of time, right? Like I'm never going to let that happen again. And I think like we have these mental things that happen, these mental flat tires or whatever, and we don't go out and get tools for next time. And yet it keeps happening. And like we don't equip ourselves with tools. We're like, that's fine, especially high achievers. We're like, I'm good, I'm fine. Man, I'm never gonna have another bad day. Like I got this, right? This whole like whatever. And it usually doesn't work out that way. So that's what the 5 tabs are all about. So or the 5 R's. So when you look at these 5 R's, actually I wanted to grab a little better explanation here. I got somewhere, so hold on 1 second. But when you look at these 5 R's, what I consider them to be is those 5 things that allow me to basically get up faster. And what I realized is one of the big differences between the successful and the unsuccessful oftentimes is like how fast can they get back up. And you see people that have bad days and then it takes them like forever to get back up. So I think that it's, especially in our industry, a lot of times we don't have the luxury of that. We don't have the luxury of taking 5 days to recover or get better or whatever you want to call it. Make sense? So that's kind of where a lot of this comes from.
Too, Wayne, that I love about the 5 R's, because I've heard speakers say everything, and because I don't want to mix up these 2 things. I've heard speakers say everything from don't dwell. Are you dwelling or are you doing? And you want to stay in that productive mindset, but it's also important that I think sometimes we get back up too quickly without acknowledging that we're down. And I think what the 5 R's says that's so unique is it says, I'm having a tough time, or I'm struggling right now, but this is going to help me bolster back up. So it allows you both to feel and to, instead of to just dwell or to just kind of brush it off and move forward. And I think that's something that not a lot of tools really offer.
Yeah, I think when I always think about the analogy of like a wound, right? Like if I get a bump on my leg, if it's just a little scratch, like keep going, like you're gonna be fine. But if I've got a gaping wound on my leg, and I think I see that happen, especially with high achievers all the time, we have these big gaping wounds on our leg, right? You just went through a divorce, or someone passed away, or you lost a ton of transactions all the time, whatever it is, and you got this gaping wound on your leg, and we just keep going. The problem is eventually you get gangrene, and they got to take the whole leg. Instead of if you had just like looked at the thing, acknowledged it, bandaged it up, right, and then you can keep going. So I think it's looking at it and not making it. We're really extreme, right? Which is one thing that makes us so successful. It's also like can kick our butt. So like we're like it's the end of the world, or like it doesn't matter at all. And too often we're like doesn't matter at all. You know what I mean? It's like dude, like that's you had a bad day, like your leg's bleeding profusely. You might want to look at it. You know what I mean? And his high achiever's like, got this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then 2 months later, it's like, Doug lost his leg. What happened? It's like, well, he didn't go to the doctor for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? So.
Exactly. So the first one, which I love reframing. This is possibly the one that resonated best with me. And I've kind of changed it in my own mind to I don't have to, I get to. Because I think that was the analogy that you used of, so many of us, especially in real estate or independent contractors, we're working for ourselves, we're making our own hours. And those of us, that have families or girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it may be, other obligations. Sometimes, like, do you ever have that stuff come up and you're saying, oh, now I have to be home to pick up the kids, or like,
Like we pick our kid up at school, and somebody said one time they go like they're picking their kid up at school, and they go, "Oh, why are you picking me up instead of mom?" And he goes, "I had to pick you up because mom, blah blah." And he's like, when I realized what I had just said, of like what he just said was like, "You're a burden to me. This sucks. I don't know why I'm having to get you." Right? Like when he realized like what was underneath that, it was like, and his kid wasn't like crying or all upset about it. It's just we use all these common stuff we don't realize. So for me, reframe is one thing. Let me say it this way. I realize we have the power to reframe our world. Right? We all have that power. And most of the pain we experience is based on our perception of experiences, not necessarily the experience itself. So what hit me wasn't, when this hit me was, I remember years ago, I was traveling all the time. I was on the road doing bowls, I was gone. I was hardly sleeping ever. I get home, it's like Friday night or Thursday night. I got a couple hours of sleep before I got to get up the next morning. Right? I'm exhausted. I'm laying in my bed, and it's like 1, 2 in the morning. and I hear my daughter cry. She's probably 1.5 years old at the time, right? I hear her cry, and the first thought to my brain is like, are you kidding me, right? Like, this is the 8 minutes I was going to get to sleep, and now I have to go take care of her, right? I have to go take care of her.
That is the first thought that every parent has. So like,
yes.
The 5 R's does not make you not have those thoughts.
No, yes. Yeah. First off, this is no miracle cure. Yeah. Let's just like on your hand, right? Okay, there we go. Maybe we should get them tattooed. So I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And then I had just been teaching Bold all week. So fortunately, my mind's kind of in this good place, right? And I'm like, man, I need to change this experience. And what hit me was, I think it was kind of a God thing, but what hit me was I remember a friend of mine years ago, Mitchell, and his daughter had died of SIDS around 2 years old. And all of a sudden I remember the pain. I had to sell their house. And I remember he couldn't even go in the room. And it just the emotion, the weight he had around that. And I thought he would give anything in the world right now to be woken up in the middle of the night by his daughter crying. Right? Yeah. I get emotional just thinking about it, right? He would give anything to have the experience that I'm going to complain about. And all of a sudden, from that point on, literally every night when my daughter cries, I have this like, she's still here. Like, she's alive. This is amazing. I'm so grateful. Right. So I'm like flooded with this gratitude every time it happens because I chose to reframe that experience. Right. And it messes me up. It's freaking awesome. You know what I mean? And in what could have been a negative experience over and over and over and over is now this amazing experience. You know what I mean? And I think that we can take that and do it in all these areas of our life. And so often, even in our real estate business, we want to just brush stuff off, but you have a transaction that falls apart or whatever it is. And can you reframe that experience and see it in a different way? Can you reframe what somebody cutting off in traffic means? Can you reframe, that upset seller? All these things that we can reframe, and it changes everything.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it also like puts you in check too, where that story that you told, I mean, so powerful, but I mean, you sit there in real estate and you get frustrated with a client and you think to yourself, oh, this client's so frustrating, but like, how would you feel if you didn't have clients? Like, the point is to have clients.
Yeah.
So you've got to say how grateful I am to have the clients that can frustrate me, those things isn't always easy. We will have those negative thoughts creep in, but this tool or these tools are meant to help you overcome that. So let's go to the second one, reshifting. What's reshifting, Wayne?
So, and a lot of these kind of tie together. So reshifting is kind of the belief that, like, so let's say I get, let's go to like, I get cut off in traffic, right? I can reshift how I see that. I can reshift my experience around that. And a lot of times when we talk about reshifting, really it's kind of going in my mind here. I think there's 3 ways that I reshift. So if you want to write them down, not you write them down, but if you're watching this, you can write them down. 3 that are really powerful for me. So one is shifting my energy from judger to learner. So I'm really good at judger. I've practiced most of my life getting awesome at beating the crap up out of myself emotionally, and getting better and better, but realizing that when I'm on that judger path that leads to like quicksand in a black hole, I can take a shortcut and go to learner. So judger is like, why did I suck at my schedule today? What's wrong with me? I'm never going to get better at this. Learner's like, what can I do different? What did I learn? What's going to be better? Judger's down and backwards, learner's up and forwards, right? So the second one is victim to victor, shifting my energy from victim mode to being a victor, which I don't think is a one-time choice. I think that's something you have to decide over and over and over, right? Sometimes 100 times in a day, you have to make the decision to not be a victim. And then the third reshift for me is going from fault to responsibility. Like, there's a lot of times when things aren't my fault. I mean, sometimes things are my fault. Like, let's get it real straight. But right, not everything's my fault. Everything is my responsibility, right? So it's not my fault that a guy rear-ended me. It's my responsibility how I react to that situation. Make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that what I love about reshifting and these examples, so like judger to learner, for instance, I think it's so important to also use on how you're interacting with other people. So this is something that I actually do with my daughter. She and I just have very different ways of thinking about things. And so something that I believe I've explained, she'll either not do it and I realize this is like the woe of any parent, but she'll not do it or she'll do something different or whatever. And what I realized as I was getting frustrated is I was judging that she wasn't just doing what I asked her to. And then when I was reshifted into that learning mode, I started, instead of saying, why didn't you do this? I started saying, what did you not understand about what I asked? And I started to realize, and that's where I actually kind of had that epiphany of, we just think totally differently. Things that I'm explaining seem irrelevant to her, not because she's uninterested in the task, but because that isn't part of the task to her. But she needs to hear all of these other things that I think she just automatically would understand. And so it has drastically improved our communication and her ability to actually do tasks. So now if she doesn't do something, or if she misbehaves or something like that, my first question is, what did you not understand about what I said? Versus why did you do that? And I think that to me is, and for me, it's been really powerful because, again, these aren't just professional tools that you have. Having kind of that positive frame at home is really important too. I know I'm not the only parent that kind of beats myself, yell at the kids or something like that. And I think understanding the way that their minds work and communicating in that way, or clients if it is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. Have you ever read the book The Anatomy of Peace?
I have not.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you. Awesome book, right? That helps you understand this on a whole, it'll blow you away. You'll probably do a whole call on it at some point in the future.
I love it.
I'll send it to you.
That's awesome. So the third one, refocusing. This one is one that I always love, which is all about, well, I'll let you explain it, Wayne.
So, I mean, like, well, for you, where do you find yourself using it? Like, where do you find yourself using refocus?
I think I'm one of those that tries to look, that'll get really like tied up in the minutia of things. And I don't know why that is. That's how I've always been of, I want A to Z to work the right way versus just focused on E, and so all little things, for instance, my brother just got married this past weekend, and he and his now wife were saying, this was the timeline, this was what I wanted to say here, and things like that. And I remember saying to him, look, if you screw up, you're the only one that knows, because nobody else knows what's supposed to happen. And so I use refocusing all the time to kind of remind myself of what's the big picture, what's the end goal in mind, and how can I focus back to that instead of worrying about all this noise. And to me, if I look at any of these 5 R's, I think refocusing is probably the biggest key to being successful in real estate, because God, is there so much noise in real estate.
God, it's everything. It's everything. And so, and I think you're so true. And like, it's like that. I think Tony Robbins was one of the first people to say it, but he said, basically where your focus goes, your energy flows. Right. And you and I both get that. If I focus on like how terrible something is, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. If I focus on what's great, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. So like where your focus goes, your energy flows. Most people don't recognize their ability to refocus. Right. They go, well, that's what it is. Right. Like they take things as kind of face value, which is really just their interpretation based on their history. Right. It's not. It's their interpretation. Right. So when you look at refocus, I think that a big refocus for me was one was like how I viewed problems, and realizing like a life without problems actually isn't probably that awesome, right? Like if we didn't have problems, we wouldn't have things to be proud of. Yeah, exactly. Right. But also not be like rose colored, like, hey, everything's like, best day ever, but like realizing the problems are actually a gift. You know what I mean? Like the analogy we talked about the other day was like, it's like a mechanic. Imagine a mechanic that came to you and said, man, I hate that people keep coming here with broke cars.
Yeah.
You'd be like,
or the doctor.
That's what you do. Why do sick people keep coming to see me? Like, what is wrong with us? This is not cool, right? And that's like realtors, when somebody goes and buys a truck 2 days before closing, like, that's why you have a job, because people need you. They have problems, and you're an awesome problem solver. So I think that reshift is huge for me. And then I think the other one is just like refocusing on my race and not comparing myself to other people. And I think one of the biggest issues nowadays is the opportunity to compare ourselves, not with just people in the same office or on the same block, but like literally with everyone in the world, right? I can grab my phone and compare myself with everyone in the world in about 2 seconds. And when I'm comparing myself to others, my joy, my energy, everything else goes, it takes all of that, right? So realizing that I'm running my own race, right? Somebody else didn't start at the same place. They don't have the same goals. They're not going to the same place. So focusing on my journey, using other people's inspiration, not comparison. So that's another powerful refocus for me. So
absolutely. I think that's so important. That's something that, we all do so much. And it's something too that I think, and Wayne, I know you can speak to this too, but I had this conversation once with my dad about comparison, and he said, why are you even bothering? And at that moment, I kind of realized this is not really an epidemic that faced other generations. Like the comparison thing was so much easier to avoid, because if you never went to someone's house or drove in the car with them and all you did ever was be in the office with them, you might have no idea how they live or what they're doing or things like that. But now you've got Facebook and Instagram and all those things. So you have a window into people's lives, and I know that everybody sits there and says, how are they doing this, or what are they doing that, or do they ever work, or whatever.
Yeah. Like all my friends are on vacation at all times. I don't know how they do it, but according to my phone, every friend that you're probably on vacation right now, according to my phone, right? Like, I don't know how it works, right? It's amazing.
Kind of this self-defeating mentality and situation of, it's in my face what everyone else is doing. Yeah. And I don't think that's something that many people were faced before us. That I think is an important thing to acknowledge, because, if you are a Gen X or a millennial or younger, even younger, you're facing this on a much higher level than I think a baby boomer or otherwise is.
Yeah, it's really wild. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the big thing the analogy that helped me the most there was the analogy of I'm comparing where I'm at in my let's say my snakes and ladders game to where somebody else is at in Monopoly. Like, we're not even playing the same game. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to compare where we are. It's not even the same game. So
right, and I mean, I had
race.
this conversation with an agent in our office, and I think it's an important one to have, especially in real estate, is you come in and what every new agent does is they immediately look at the producer in their office who is probably a minimum of 5, more like 10 years to build their business to where it's at,
Yes.
And
so, Well, I was just sorry. Yeah, well, I was just saying, I was listening to a podcast last night, and a guy was talking about how he came into real estate and was wildly successful within his first year or two. He goes, but what people didn't realize is the decade before that, I was a real estate investor in another part of the country, and I understood real estate and marketing I had a 10-year learning period that they didn't see. They just saw that I came into real estate, and all of a sudden I was a success overnight. They didn't see this decade that I spent doing all this stuff, right? And I think it's so often we didn't start at the same place. We're not having the same goals. We're not going to the same place. So use people as inspiration, not comparison.
Absolutely. So what's Reengaging? Reengaging is the fourth one. I think it builds nicely off of refocusing. So talk about Reengaging.
Yeah. So I think Reengage is what and here's what's interesting. A lot of these 5 R's usually when I talk to people about these, they make sense because the high achievers are already doing these. They just didn't necessarily have a term for it. Like most people are doing this, but I think having some language and awareness around it allows it to happen faster, if that makes sense. So Reengage is, right? How do I get back up? What's the next right action? I think sometimes we don't get back into action because we're worried about the next 35 steps. Sometimes Reengage is just what's the next right decision. I asked a coach one time, I said, how do you live a perfect life? And he said, you just take the next right step. And then after that, you take the next right step. Then you take the next right step. So just take the next right step. And a lot of times stress and anxiety will go away when you just take the next right action. So I think it's just what's the next right decision. The faster I can take action, the faster I can get back up. So, and I think what you said earlier, I just want to push on that a minute because I think what you said is so brilliant. I want people to catch it. This is not like about having a perfect life or perfect days. Like people ask me all the time, like, do you ever have bad days? I'm like, yes, right? Like 5 seconds ago, right? You know what I mean? Like, but this is about catching it faster and faster and faster. So instead of it being I used to have a bad 5 days, now I use the 5 R's and I have a bad 5 minutes, right? So the analogy that he gave me was, you know, if a car is about to roll down a hill and you try to catch that car when it's barreling, it's halfway down the hill, like you're not stopping that car, right? Like it's going right through you. But the closer to the top of the hill that I stop that car, the easier it is, right? If it's at the very top of the hill and it just barely starts to roll, I can probably stop the thing with a finger. You know what I mean? So this is kind of the longer we stay there, the harder it is. And these 5 tools are about being able to catch the car faster and faster and faster and faster. But like you said, you're never going to not have the car roll. Like somebody's going to cut you off in traffic. Your kid's going to say something that makes you want to send them to heaven, right? Like, I mean, things happen, you know what I mean? So my son, like, it's like, how do you not know where your shoes are? I love you so much. And dear sweet mother of Jesus, where are your shoes? Right? Absolutely. Like, it's going to happen, but like, that's not going to mess my day up, right? It's going to mess me up for a second.
That's something I say all the time. I say it to my kids. I say it to my clients. I say it to myself is, did you have a bad day or did something bad happen today? And I think that's so key is, you know, we all make the mistake of waking up to this first thing in the morning and it's filled with bad things. It can be. And when you let that energy guide you for the rest of the day, you're going to have a bad day. But if you can kind of refocus, reshift, do all of these 5 R's, it can really change the trajectory of your day, which can change, in my opinion, and I do want to touch on this, it's so much more than mindset. All of these are tools to help you change your mindset, but you're not just changing the trajectory of your day or your mindset, you're changing the trajectory of the things you're working on, the people you're interacting with. Because when you're bringing a negative mindset to that, you're not bringing your full self. When you can bring a positive, productive mindset to that, you are. And that will lead to multiple positive results, which is, to me, super impactful.
Yeah. Well, your quote that I always think about is you do good when you feel good, right? I think you said you do your best when you feel your best. And it's so true. If your mind is in the way, you're not going to make as much money. You're not going to be the parent you want to be. You're not, it's just, there's a direct correlation between this and your bank account.
Yes. And that's a perfect segue to the final R, which is Reenergize. I think so much, like basically everything in my eyes is directly correlated with our energy. You wake up 5 minutes late, it may have kind of this tumbleweed effect on the rest of your day. If something bad happens, it can suck all the energy out of you or suck all the excitement out of you. And so finding those ways to re-energize. And I think the really important part that I love that you and I talk about a whole lot is there's different ways to energize. And you like to do a little bit of self-discovery and those sorts of activities. And you have to try a few different things to figure out what re-energizing is for you. Because the key is it's not sleep. Everybody thinks it's, if I get enough sleep, I'll be re-energized. And for me, sleep is important, but more sleep does not give me more energy.
Yes. Yeah. After 8 hours, like it's not helping more. Like
studies show that there's no benefit after no increased benefit after 8 hours. So it's not just more sleep. And so what I'm referring to, and I know that you know that this is a passion topic for me too, but what I'm referring to is your whole health, meaning how you eat, how you act, your exercise habits, your work habits. So how, if you're going up to a messy desk and you've got to dig through things to find the things you're working on, that can suck energy out. So if you show up and you've got your planner for the day and you know how you're going to do things, is that going to build energy into your day? So what are some things that build some energy into your day, Wayne?
So for me, like Reenergize is like that stuff. It's like drinking enough water. It's like trying to eat well. So like I have enough highs and lows as it is. Like right naturally I as high achievers we go up and down all over the place, right? So like adding in sugar crashes and spikes like is not like that's not really a great thing. I don't need any help with my ups and downs, right? So like am I eating good? Am I drinking enough water? Reenergize for me a lot of times is like go for a 5-minute walk. Or like actually breathe for 30 seconds, right? Like in 4 times through my nose, out 4 times through my mouth. Like do that a couple times, like, or lay on the floor and just meditate for 5 minutes. You know, so a lot of times it's not these way overcomplicated things. It's usually simple things I can do within a couple of minutes that just totally get me back. So, and sometimes it is more extreme. Sometimes it's calling somebody and giving them gratitude, because gratitude and fear and anxiety usually can't live in the same place, right? So it's that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's like just making sure I'm having enough fun in my life. I had one of my clients yesterday, right? He's this very wealthy dude, and his homework for the week was go watch some funny movies. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Dude, if you don't start laughing a little bit, you're gonna die. Like literally, like your body is going to shut down. You need to laugh." And right, like so, I think it's all those.
That's such a good point, because I think when we say re-energize, it implies that our energy is too low. And I think it goes both ways too. So like, you know this, and most of the folks watching probably know that my like physical exercise habits have to do with, in part, and I don't know that everybody knows this part, but in part it has to do with my ADHD. Is I wake up with excess energy, and all of you guys are like, not a problem, Melissa, except it is, because I can't focus on the task again with that excess energy. And so part of my physical exercise is to help blow off some of that steam and get rid of some of that energy so that I can come to work with a more balanced mindset. And that's something that I think is super important, is we're living off coffee, and we're looking for more and more and more energy. And sometimes it's what to calm you down. Like, is that 5-minute walk going to be good for you after you've had a really stressful phone call? Is that, you know, shutting the computer for an hour going to help you? Like, what do you need an ice cream cone? Like, what do you
seriously, yes.
To zero, so to speak. And I think the other thing that I like about, you know, re-energizing too, and this is something you and I have talked about at length as well, is also seeing those red flags. So you have to be proactive, frankly, about any of the R's, but especially about re-energizing. Is, you know, is my energy too high? Is my energy too low? Do I see a blow up coming? Am I getting to a point where I need to implement one of these tools? And that takes a lot of self-work too.
Well, and what I love about you, what you talked about at the 30 under 30 reading was one of the things you talked about was like, what's your maintenance plan? Like, just like you have a maintenance plan for your car, do you have a maintenance plan for you? And so much of this stuff is, so much of our issues are actually self-induced, right? So it's like, what's my maintenance plan to not get myself on the edge of the cliff? I see so many high achievers that they're living so close to the edge that they get a parking ticket and they lose it, right? They're bawling, right? It's like, it's a $10 ticket, you're going to be okay, but they were so close to the edge that there was no margin there, right? They weren't taking care of themselves. They weren't drinking water. They weren't doing. They're right there.
Going to blow you, absolutely. And so I think that's really key. Is you got to know when you're getting close instead of just living there.
So let me share this really quick, if it's okay. This is and I think I shared this with you before, but like, I love this little graph that talks about like on the left hand side is like who we usually are, you know what I mean, like intense, intelligent, focused, aware, like relentless, awesome, right? We're confident and driven and curious and all this amazing stuff. But then most of us, if we, and I call it tilted, but if we get tilted, we go over here. We start getting aggressive and arrogant, obsessive, sensitive, cutthroat, conceited, irrational, paranoid, antisocial, like all this stuff starts showing up. So for me, I love this little graph, because if I start feeling this stuff, it's like, ooh, dude, you're tilted. Like, you probably need to re-energize, refocus. We're like, so you need to get back. Or what else that helps me too is if we're talking and some of the stuff starts showing up, you start sounding, you know, paranoid or cutthroat or oversensitive, whatever it is. It's like, okay, maybe she's a little tilted, right? She's not freaking broken. She's just tilted. And what do we got to do to get back? So, and this helps a lot with other people, right? our clients, a lot of times, if you're selling real estate, they show up here because they're freaking tilted. And if you remember last time you moved, you were probably over here too. So
yeah,
that's my 2 cents.
Well, and I think the other thing too is if you guys are listening to Wayne and I talk and you're like, I don't really know where I fall. Like, I'm a little worried that maybe I have some of those things, but like, man, no, I don't. Like, find somebody who tells you when you're like that. I think, and frankly, and I think Wayne would agree, that's why so many people are uncomfortable with coaching, because you get called on being those things. And it's so much more than numbers. It is more than what we do. But I think even if it's just another agent in the office, if it's your spouse, and the other advice I would give people is get comfortable getting called on those things. If you want to operate at your peak performance, you have to be okay being told when you're not, which is not.
I think what you and I are so good at is helping people realize like they're not broken, they're just tilted, right? Like it's not you're a messed up person. It's like, hey, this strategy isn't serving you, right? So what if you just you know what I mean? And I think people don't realize that that's what we're about. We see their greatness and we're just trying to help them get rid of some of the stuff that maybe isn't serving them at the highest level.
Absolutely. And the other piece of advice that I'd give anybody is if you are planning to call somebody out on being one of those things, be prepared with a solution as to, or a recommendation as to how their behavior or how their actions could change. I think it's never a good sign to essentially just feel comfortable calling people out without being proactive about, okay, what could I do to help solve this? So, well, Wayne, thank you so much for joining us. You guys, if you want to get a copy of his book, it's called The Art of Getting Back Up. It's available on Amazon. I will include the link down below so that you guys can get it. It's definitely worth the read. Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure having you, for sure.
Thank you, my friend. Love you. Love what you're doing. And the people in your community are very lucky to have you. They probably have no idea how lucky they really are. So thank you for everything you do. Seriously.
Thank you, my friend. You guys, next month in October, we'll kind of be continuing this sort of theme of self-care and self-awareness. We're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is self-care in terms of the physical side of things. We'll be joined by Tim Collins from Real Estate Webmasters, and he's going to talk about how this industry and this business oftentimes impacts our lifestyle and how we can go back to living a healthier lifestyle. And some of the things he's done, he's created a really valuable online community, but I'm going to let him explain all of that next month. So join us back. We'll have the date for you guys down below, but we are super excited. So again, thank you so much, Wayne. You're absolutely amazing as always. And we hope to have you back again soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate you.
Awesome.